Hey everyone, this is Exploring Fiction, and welcome back to another video. So guys, today we kind of have a new video for you. I think this is my first screen capture one, but what we are doing today is an MCU tier list. And now this MCU tier list is as of August 2022, so the most recent MCU project was Thor Love and Thunder. So anyway guys, we have S tier, A tier, B tier, C, D, F, and then I have an NA because there are a couple MCU projects which I haven't seen and I don't really have any mind to see. So I haven't really thought about how I'm going to put together this tier list beforehand, so there's not really much thought, or at least previous thought, that's gone into this before this video. So I'm just as excited as you guys are to see how this is going to turn out, but just know this is my subjective list, tier list. It's not the right list, just mine. Comment below how you would rank MCU films, and let's dive right into it. So to start, let's start with the first Iron Man. And now, I love this movie. Overall, where do I want to put this movie? I think Iron Man is A tier. Robert Downey Jr. is great. I love this movie as an opening to the MCU, and will forever be nostalgic for me, if nothing else. But I really think it's A tier. I think as far as debut movies go, it's pretty hard to top. Let's look at debut movies in general, and let's go with the first Thor. Now, this movie, I think this movie is a solid B tier. Now, it's not perfect. I liked it a lot when I first saw it. And then, as I, the couple years after it originally came out, I wasn't as big of a fan. But looking back recently, I can really appreciate this movie and the kind of feeling of grandeur that went along with it. And the fish out of water story with Thor on Earth and him becoming worthy. And I think this was a great original addition to the MCU. Next up, Captain America, the First Avenger. And I don't know if this is unpopular, but this movie for me is A tier, ahead of the original Iron Man. Now, I am a sucker for this movie, Captain America, the First Avenger. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't rank it where I have it, but I am really a huge fan. I just love everything about this movie. The cast, the plot. I don't even mind that it skipped over a lot of World War II and it turned into a montage. There's a lot about this movie I love. Specifically, the lovable characters. Steve Rogers in this movie really shines as being the little guy who wants to just do the right thing for his country. And yeah, it might be unpopular, but Captain America, the First Avenger is A tier for me. Next, Incredible Hulk. And while I don't hate this movie, it's going to be D tier. I don't ever really think about coming back to this movie, and so there's not really much that's there for me. I don't mind Edward Norton as Bruce Banner / Hulk. I really don't, but again, I barely ever revisit this movie. I think I've seen it a total of 2 times, and it just feels so disconnected from the rest of the MCU. That's really my main issue here. Next, why don't we do Captain Marvel, and this one automatically F tier. I feel like this is one of my least favorite Marvel movies, mainly because Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, her character, just feels like she doesn't have to go on any sort of journey. She already has all the power in the world. She just has to figure out how to use it. And so she's not really compelling. She's kind of boring. There are some parts of this film that are cool. Seeing Samuel L. Jackson de-aged as Nick Fury is cool. But again, there's also some retcons that I don't really agree with, like how they came up with the term Avengers because of her call sign or what. Also, the way Nick Fury got his eye gouged out, that doesn't sit well with me. So, for that reason, Captain Marvel, definitely F tier. Next up, another solo movie, Ant-Man. And for me, I love me some Ant-Man. This movie is one of the smallest scale in the MCU, but also one of the most rewatchable. You know what? I love Ant-Man, but I can't put him in A tier. So that's a solid B tier for me. Um, yeah, the original Ant-Man's great. It's small scale, fun, kind of a heist movie, wrapped into the MCU. I love it. The original Doctor Strange. This one really gets hyped up, but honestly, like I like it. I like it, but it's got to be B tier for me. Um, Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange is the perfect casting, and the visuals are spectacular, but kind of a weak villain, and I don't know. I don't rewatch it as much as I do some other solo movies. Black Panther. Now, if you would have talked to me a few years ago, I would have said this movie was in my top 5, but looking back, there's more problems with it than I thought to admit at first. So for me, it's a solid B tier, in between Ant-Man and Thor right now. But yeah, Black Panther, good movie, good movie. Chadwick Boseman is great. Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, great. But, it has its problems. But I still like it. Next, Eternals. And Eternals goes straight to the F tier. Only thing is, do I put it ahead or behind Captain Marvel? Would I rather watch Captain Marvel or the Eternals? Probably rather watch Eternals. So F tier, but ahead of Captain Marvel. This film I really did not enjoy. The introduction of so many new characters was just an assault on my brain. I don't know. The scope was grand, but it felt very MCU formula. And I think they had the potential to do something really cool with this film, but they just didn't deliver. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And the more I think about it, the more it's grown on me, actually. But I'm going to have to place it solid C tier. For me, the third act, where they go to that magic land with all the weird animals and monsters, really took the movie downhill for me. I really liked the kung fu street style fighting movie that 2/3 of Shang-Chi was. But that third act just made it into this mystical, magical thing that I think didn't really fit it as a movie. And I think it made it over the top and too bland when it had its own thing, a good thing going in the first 2/3. So that's why it's C tier for me. Black Widow. Black Widow. Black Widow is D tier behind The Incredible Hulk. Black Widow, everyone said it, but it's just a movie that came too late to the MCU, telling a story that would have been cool if it had been done sooner, and having it done after Endgame when we know Natasha's dead. It's just hard to care about what's going on in that movie when we know the ultimate ending. And so, yeah, I can't have it higher than D tier for that reason. Looks like we'll start getting into sequels here. But first, Marvel's The Avengers. The first Avengers movie, undoubtedly S tier. What a great film. It showed us that we could take an interconnected universe of superheroes in a movie and put them all together on the big screen, and that it would work. I mean, this movie is just an all-time classic. The chemistry between all the main characters, great. Loki is a great villain for this movie, and you can tell there's something backing him even more sinister that will come up later, but yeah. The first Avengers movie, no doubt, S tier. Next, the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and this one is also S tier, and I'm putting it ahead of the original Avengers. Now, this movie, I expected it, just much like other people, to be absolutely terrible, but it ended up being one of my top 3 movies in the MCU. It is just, the comedy is hilarious. It's probably one of the funniest MCU movies. I love Chris Pratt. I love Zoe Saldana. I love Dave Bautista. I love all the main characters, and seeing them kind of grow into a family throughout the film just, yeah, it makes you fall in love with these characters, and they might be the most likable team or group in the MCU. That brings us to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And for me, this one is C tier ahead of Shang-Chi. I think that this movie, I remember I was on Instagram watching Chris Pratt's videos where he was hyping this movie up, and I got super excited because he said it was going to be even better than the first one, and I believed it. And that's my own fault, not his, but yeah, I went in with super high expectations, and they just weren't met. The film was still very good, very good. I enjoyed it a lot, but it just wasn't as good as I thought it could have been. The cast was still on point, and Yandu was a much better character in this one, but there were just some missteps or things they didn't do enough to where I felt this film left something to be desired. And actually, before we go any further, I'll put the 2 projects in NA of the ones that I haven't watched. I have not seen the Miss Marvel series, and I really don't have any interest to, and I have not seen the What If Season 1, and I really don't have any interest to see that either. I don't want to check them out. They've come out in the current era of Marvel, backed by Disney, that I just have been losing enjoyment in, and for that reason, yeah, I just don't want to watch them, and I don't care to. So with that out of the way, let's keep moving on. Iron Man 2. Now, this movie I'll put in D tier, probably right in front of Incredible Hulk. Now, this one's kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I love Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer. He carries this movie for me, but I just can't justify putting it any higher because of the, plot lines spread too thin, too many plot lines, not enough movie. And yeah, they just tried to do too much with this one. I still love it. I still will rewatch it a lot, but I have to be honest with myself here. Iron Man 2 just can't be higher than D tier. Speaking of D tier, we have Thor the Dark World. And yes, I'm putting it in D tier. Also in front of Incredible Hulk, but not in front of Iron Man 2. Now, yes, you could say that Thor the Dark World might be the worst objectively in the MCU. However, I'm a fan of fantasy work and, movies and fiction in general. So, Thor the Dark World isn't terrible for me. Yeah, it's bland. Yeah, the villain's really boring. But looking at it as kind of this fantasy action movie in the MCU, I can rewatch it if I'm in the right mood. But it's nothing special. And again, I can't justify putting it higher than D tier. Next, we'll go with Captain America the Winter Soldier. And this movie, undoubtedly S tier. And this one's going to go in front of Guardians of the Galaxy. Captain America the Winter Soldier might just be the best movie in the MCU. I love everything about it. How it's a political spy thriller. You get that freedom versus security question. And the characterization of the Winter Soldier, great. The friendship of Steve, Sam Wilson, and Natasha, great. I mean, everything about it, the pacing, the action, is just unmatched in my opinion in the MCU. And it's gritty, it's real, but it's still a superhero movie. And all of it encompassed together just makes for one of the best entries, if not the best, in the entire MCU. Next, we'll take a look at the third Captain America Civil War. And now, so many people would be tempted to put this in S tier, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in A tier, honestly, behind Captain America the First Avenger. Yeah, that's where I'm going to put it. I know that's a hot take. I know Civil War is usually in people's top 5, and trust me, I love it. I remember it coming out and watching it like it was yesterday. It felt like an even bigger version of Avengers, and the conflict within it, the Avengers being against each other, and the background villain of Zemo is very much a background villain. And I don't really have many criticisms to levy at Civil War. It's just that there are some movies in the MCU I would rather watch more. So, yeah. Next, we'll move on to Iron Man 3. And this movie is also a guilty pleasure for me. I love Iron Man 3. I'm going to put it in C tier ahead of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, Iron Man 3, like I just said, it's a guilty pleasure. I like seeing Tony outside the suit trying to be a superhero still. And honestly, the whole fake Mandarin thing did not bother me one bit. I like the idea of Aldrich Killian trying to play the villain and the hero for him to come out on top, where he's trying to control both Mandarin and Iron Patriot. So I didn't mind that whole twist. Like, I know some comic book purist fans didn't like the whole thing with the Mandarin, but I don't know. That didn't really bother me, and so for me, that didn't detract from my enjoyment of this movie. So it's a solid C tier for me. Next, we'll take a look at Spider-Man Homecoming, and I believe this is definitely B tier, ahead of Black Panther, and I'll put it ahead of Ant-Man as well, because I'm just thinking about which one I would rather rewatch, and rewatchability is a big part of it for me. But Spider-Man Homecoming, yeah, what a fun film. And you know, some criticism is sent its way saying that, you know, he feels like Iron Man Jr. and whatever. But I love the twist of his love interest's dad being the villain, and this is Spider-Man's first solo movie in the MCU, and I couldn't be happier with how it really turned out. Next, we'll take a look at Thor Ragnarok, and this for me goes up to S tier, behind Guardians of the Galaxy, but ahead of the original Avengers film. And I love Thor Ragnarok. The mix of comedy, action, and heartfelt moments is a perfect blend only Taika Waititi could pull off, or at least it seemed that way. And the direction this took both Thor and Hulk was great, in my opinion. The color palette, too, just visually stunning. It's such a great and needed contrast from Thor the Dark World that, yeah, Thor Ragnarok, one of my top Marvel movies. This brings us to Ant-Man and the Wasp. Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'll put it at the end of C tier. You know, I watched it, I enjoyed it. I like seeing Paul Rudd as Ant-Man again. Michael Douglas as Hank Pym is great. The character of Hope now becoming the Wasp, really, really liked it. And you know, it's another smaller scale story in the MCU, and I took it for what it was. It's definitely not the first Ant-Man, but still very enjoyable. Next, Avengers Age of Ultron. And like Iron Man 3, I think this one gets too much hate. And I'm going to put this ahead of Doctor Strange, but behind... No, I'll put it ahead of the first Thor, but behind Black Panther. Because, to me, Avengers Age of Ultron, it's a little bit of a turn from the original Avengers, and it's not quite matching the later Avengers movies, but Age of Ultron... I like the characterization of Ultron, and you know, like with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, some people didn't agree with how they did Ultron in the MCU, but I enjoyed it. You know, this movie feels a little more gritty than the first Avengers, where it feels more real, but the addition of Wanda Maximoff and Pietro Maximoff's quick little run as Quicksilver were great character additions, and I felt like this one really did some groundwork for the future MCU, and that Hulkbuster versus Hulk scene, man, fantastic. So I really enjoyed Avengers Age of Ultron, and I think it gets too much hate. So for me, it's middle B tier. that brings us to Spider-Man Far From Home. And Far From Home, I'll honestly put at the end of B tier. I also really enjoyed this one, and I think it gets far too much hate. And this is the film where people really started saying that Spider-Man was Iron Man Jr., but look, for me, I always knew that the MCU Spider-Man, I always felt like it was great that they were doing a high school Spider-Man, and he's really developing into his own throughout the whole trilogy. So I didn't have a problem. The cast here, fantastic. I loved Zendaya as MJ in this film way more than in Homecoming. Like, that's the biggest improvement. And her kind of awkward teen romance with Peter, I thought that was very Spider-Man-ish. And so I thought that was a great way to make this film more likable in my eyes. And Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was a fantastic villain. Great casting. I wish we had more of him. But yeah, Spider-Man Far From Home, a very underrated film. That will bring us to Thor, Love and Thunder. And now for me, Thor, Love and Thunder goes at the top of the F tier. And I hate to do this, because if you've seen my recent Thor, Love and Thunder video, you'll know that I really, really wanted to like this movie. And what I really wanted was a sequel to Thor Ragnarok that I knew wouldn't be as good as Thor Ragnarok, but that I could throw on right after it and just kind of sit down and enjoy it. And while the visual color palette and visuals were the same, and the music felt like it was a sequel to Ragnarok, everything else kind of fell flat for me. Thor felt like a walking joke the entire movie. I was okay with Jane Foster becoming Mighty Thor, but they focused way too much on her and Valkyrie. This kind of became the Mighty Thor movie instead of being about Thor. And I just think undermining him as a hero throughout the entire movie just doesn't bode well for a movie that's supposed to be about Thor. And so that's why Thor Love and Thunder is F tier for me. So next we'll do Spider-Man No Way Home. And even after the hype has kind of died down behind No Way Home, I'm still going to put it ahead of the original Avengers, yet behind Thor Ragnarok. So I love No Way Home, even if the plot is kind of contrived a little bit. I think Peter and MJ's romance growing a little further, great. Seeing villains from past Spider-Man movies and universes, great. Andrew and Tobey teaming up with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I mean, what more could you want? The whole premise of the Spider-Verse, which I don't really like that much to begin with, they perfected it here. And I think all three actors just played their hearts out in their roles in this movie and really delivered. And so for that reason, Spider-Man No Way Home does end up in my S tier. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. For me, this one's middle D tier. I would probably watch it over Incredible Hulk and Thor the Dark World, but I don't think I like it more than Iron Man 2. So, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, the more I think about it, the more it wasn't really that mad. The most that happened in the multiverse was Wanda killing the Illuminati, which is another universe's version of the Avengers. And though it was fun to see some appearances, aka Professor X and John Krasinski finally as Mr. Fantastic, that was stripped away really quick. And this movie was more of a Scarlet Witch movie than anything. And again, I can't tell what they're trying to do with Wanda, if they're trying to make her seem like a hero or not. I mean, I know she's the villain, but like they're still trying to make you feel a little bit sympathetic towards her, and I don't know, that just doesn't work for me. And so for that reason, Doctor Strange 2 is D tier. Now, before we get to the two final Avengers movies, let's move on to the TV shows. So first, Falcon and Winter Soldier goes at the very bottom of F tier, even farther back than Captain Marvel. This show is complete trash. Complete trash. I mean, Wyatt Russell is John Walker, the only saving grace here. And Yeah, everything else was just garbage for me. I mean, I don't think Sam should have gotten the shield to begin with. I think that was Bucky's shield, and I think it would have been made more sense in the context of the universe for Bucky to get the shield, and it would have made for a better story, because then Bucky would try and have to reconcile, how can I be Captain America in this modern world that knows that I've been a terrorist in the past? I think that would have been cool. But the route they chose to go with Sam, and he gives up the shield right away, dumb. They really wanted to make you believe Carly, the leader of the Flag Smashers terrorist group, was a sympathetic character who we should care about when she died. Dumb. And the more I think about this series, the more I just can't stand it. And so for that reason, it goes at the very bottom for me, even below Captain Marvel in the F tier. So next we'll talk about WandaVision. WandaVision, it's also got to be F tier for me. I mean, behind Thor: Love and Thunder, ahead of Eternals. WandaVision, I mean, the first 4 episodes were kind of intriguing, and I could see, something new coming about. And then the end, just, why? Why fall back into the same Marvel formula? That last episode, what really did it for me was that whole talk of, they'll never know what you did for them. Whereas Wanda just enslaved this entire town, all for her fantasies of wanting to have her husband and fake kids back. Her kids weren't even real. What did she sacrifice for them? A fake life that she created with her superpowers? She took away the lives of 1,000 people just so she could cope? I mean, it really made Wanda dislikable, and I hate to say that because she was cool before that, but that decision alone soured me very hard on WandaVision, and so for that reason, it's F tier for me. Next, we'll take a look at Loki, and Loki I thought was very mid. It's going to be C tier, at the back of C tier. So Loki I thought was very watchable. Tom Hiddleston eats up the screen, and the whole his chemistry with Owen Wilson, Mobius, that was cool. That little kind of bromance thing, and the atmosphere of Loki is also good. And seeing Kang was cool for the first time. Some of the concepts it introduced was cool, but I don't know, I can't put it higher than that. It was just really average. Sylvie, I'm neither here nor there about. Of course she's got to be the hero in the end or whatever, but whatever. I'm just kind of in the middle about Loki, and so it's at the bottom of C tier. Hawkeye, meanwhile, will also be C tier, right above Shang-Chi, but right behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So as you can tell, the MCU Disney Plus TV shows are not really doing it too much for me, but I really enjoyed Hawkeye. I think it was the best of the Marvel TV shows. One of the best, along with Moon Knight. But, yeah, Hawkeye, I enjoyed it. It was nice, lower stakes, felt very grounded compared to other stuff in the MCU. And it felt like a very Hawkeye TV show. Seeing Vincent D'Onofrio return as Kingpin, this time in the MCU for sure, great, although they might have misused his character. I actually liked Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, and I thought her chemistry with Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton was good. And so I can't fault Hawkeye too much. It's just that, compared to a lot of these other MCU projects that rank above it, I just can't justify it putting it any higher. And that brings us to the most recent of the MCU TV shows, Moon Knight. And so Moon Knight, I know right where I'm going to put it, right in front of Hawkeye, but again, not above Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Moon Knight, it felt a little bit formulaic to the MCU cookie cutter by the end, but I really liked it. I for the most part, thought it was good. Oscar Isaac carries this series for me. So that's the main part. Oscar Isaac absolutely carries. And Ethan Hawke as... Man, what's the villain's name? I'm already forgetting it. That might tell you something, but I thought he was pretty forgettable. But, yeah, mainly it's here because of Oscar Isaac's acting ability. And, some of the action scenes, pretty cool, but, yeah, kind of middle of the road. Now, The last two entries in this list, we'll start with Avengers Infinity War. And obviously this is S tier, and I'm going to put it behind Winter Soldier. And, man, do I dare? Behind Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Now, I think objectively, Avengers Infinity War is the best MCU film. I think that it is objectively the most well-made and the best superhero movie in the MCU. Thanos is a great protagonist while being the antagonist to the heroes. All the action scenes are fantastic. Incorporating this many main characters into a film of this scope and size, great. And the ending, I got absolute chills. The Avengers actually lost. And Thor's arc in this film is great. You know, he's lost everything, and he finally gets his shot, and he misses. He doesn't kill Thanos when he could. And he feels like such a powerhouse, and to come up so short, man, what a film. And I think, like I said, objectively, Infinity War is the best MCU movie. However, I personally enjoy Winter Soldier and the first Guardians of the Galaxy a little bit more. So like I said, my subjective list, so Infinity War falls in the middle of S tier. And finally, the last one on the list, we get to Avengers Endgame. And I don't think you guys are going to like me for this one, but Avengers Endgame, hoo boy. Avengers Endgame is near the top of D tier. And I know this might be blasphemous to some people. However, a lot of the directions they went, especially after the climactic final battle, I just can't get behind. I mean, even before the big battle, the whole time travel thing, I was watching it in theaters and I was thinking to myself, is this really what they're doing? I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I would rather see the Avengers cope and try and save things from a present day standpoint than have to go back in time. That's just my opinion. I mean, they made it make sense decently well, but still, time travel, I don't know. I just, not exactly what I wanted to see. The final climactic battle, however, I mean, it was great. It was everything I wanted to see on screen. It felt like torn straight out of a comic book. And yeah, I love that final battle. Don't get me wrong. However, also using a Thanos as the main antagonist who's from a previous timeline, not the Thanos from Infinity War, that didn't really sit well with me either. And like I said, a lot of the events after the final battle, Steve giving the shield to Sam and not Bucky, Steve going back in time and yet appearing at Tony's funeral, or just appearing to some of the characters after he went back in time to return the Infinity Stones, doesn't really make sense based on the time-traveling rules they established earlier in this same film. I don't know. Just some of the directions that it set up for the future of the MCU, I just wasn't a fan of. So, for that reason, as much as it might be blasphemy in the eyes of some MCU fans, I'm putting Endgame in D tier. So guys, this is it. This is my final MCU tier list ranking. Now let me know in the comments what your list would be. Leave a like if you enjoyed this style of video. It's kind of new for me. Subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to have you. And like always, I will see you next time.